afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you find yourself. We want to say welcome to another edition of Table Talk Sunday on Liberia Shall Rise. Today, I'm going to be your humble host, Emmanuel G. Sapolusia, as our normal host, Augustine Sharif, is not available today, and I hope I can do a better job or a good job that can measure up to him. Today on Table Talk, we're going to be discussing issues that are affecting Liberia. As usual on this platform, everything we discuss is to promote the positivity of Liberia. And we believe on this platform that Liberia shall rise. And if Liberia shall rise, every one of us should have a part to play. That is the government, the citizen in the country, the citizen in the diaspora, and the citizen everywhere. So today's discussion, we're going to look at our developmental priorities in Liberia. And we can, if you can join me, or those who are available to join me, you can join me and we can discuss and let us have your insight on whatever you want us to talk about. But I'm going to be starting up by looking at some of those things that we have done. And today is April 12th, 2026. And we have gone at least 20 years since Liberia can say we have had a democratically elected presidents. At least we have had three different presidents. One served two term, one served one, and we have one that is currently serving their first term. And we need to look at some of those things that have happened. What should have happened after the war? And this is just my take. I think as a country coming from war, as Liberia was or Liberia is, we had a lot of devastation that went on in our country, starting with our infrastructure, our human capacity. And as I was Emmanuel, as a child growing up, I didn't have a normal childhood in Liberia. So most of my childhood or my teenage life was in the war. Remember, the war started in 1989, December 24th. And it ended, or the ceasefire completely, I think around August or September 2003. And some of us, like me, spent the entire time of my life and spent all my life during the war, whether it was running to Bon County or living from Bon County, and or running from one part of Monrovia to the other just for safety. Now the question is, after 20 years, what have we done? What have been our developmental priorities in Liberia? What did we learn from the war, and where are we today? You know, after a war in many countries, they start to look at the development of the human capacity, one, and then look at the infrastructure, two. Now, after 20 years, some of us are still asking, what did we learn? What have we done? Let us look at Liberia. What can we look at today and say, look, after the war or before the war, this is what we had, and today this is what we have. I remember before the war, we had most of the time we had electricity in Monrovia and the immediate environment. We had electricity. We had pipe-borne water in the Monrovia vicinity, almost in some suburb of Monrovia. We had that. That was constant. Barely water went because the hydro, when it is rainy season, we always had water. And when there's the hydro during that time as well, Burma was providing some subsidy when it comes to electricity. So during the dry season, we know there was it off and on electricity, but it was not that that serious, right? It was electricity go today and tomorrow we have electricity. However, today though, after the war, those infrastructure, most of them were destroyed. But what have we done to rebuild Liberia infrastructure after 20 years? I mean, after 14 years of war. And then after the 14 years, we have had at least stable government for 20 years. What have we built? In my opinion, if you were to ask me, I don't see much. Okay, what should we have prioritized after the war? In my belief, we should have prioritized building our human capacity and then our infrastructure. We still, up to this time, don't have a good education system. We do not have, in my opinion, good vocational system in place that will have helped to build Liberia. Now, we hear this in the news, we hear it from our citizens that, oh, Liberians are not qualified to do this job. Liberians are not qualified to do that job. Some job as simple as driving that in some countries people take for granted. In most developing countries now, driving is not considered a career unless you're driving for a million years, right? It's not really considered a career. And in that on that note, you have to train to know how to. You have a certain etiquette. Let me put it that way. To be a quote unquote driver for, let's say, millionaires or government officials, as we see in places like Liberia, right? In most developing countries, especially countries that have middle class, people are driving their own vehicles, right? Because they don't have money to pay drivers in most developing countries. But in Liberia, that is a career, just to drive vehicle for even a middle class person or somebody who is considered quote unquote middle class person, right? Because some people in Liberia don't drive. Some marketers don't drive, so they will need a driver. But even at that, we don't have those people. Operating yellow machine, for example, is a career here in the United States and most developed countries and developing countries. But in Liberia, we cannot find that. You would think a country like Liberia, coming from war, those are places that we will build our capacity, right? Because, like we all know, 2024, when this government was elected, or before it was elected, we heard of role as being one of its priority. And right, if I'm not mistaken, towards the middle of 2024, we heard about the purchases of yellow machines. Now, one would think, okay, if we're going to start building roads and we're going to build order yellow machines to start building these roads, we will need people to operate those machines. Now, what did the government do in that capacity? To my knowledge, up to today, nothing. And it been almost a year or a year and a half since they started talking about yellow machines. So some of the machines are in the country, but we don't have Liberians that can operate. A lot of Liberians that can operate that machine. I think about 150, if I'm not mistaken, and I stand to be corrected. At least 100 machines are in the country, right? And 100 machines, if you divide it by 15, got 15 counties. Of course, the proportional would not be the same because there are some countries, some counties that are a little bit more rural connected as compared to some counties, right? Like the southeast region would not be as connected as Montserrat County and some part of Maigibi and some part of Bon County and so forth. But the southeast mainly will be much more of rural where the rural connectivity is not too good. Now, we would think that those places, in my opinion, as a common man, would be prioritized, right? Where we'll have at least a standby team that will be trained, since there have been a big talk. It's not only during um the period after the war. It's something that was being a problem before the war. The southeast have always been cut off from the rest of the country. That have been a, a problem in Liberia. So you would think most government would prioritize connecting those people. Because you're talking River Says, River G, Maryland, Sano, Grand Jita, and you name it, right? That's a chunk, at least 4 or 5 counties that is cut off from the rest of the country. You would think we'll prioritize that for rural connectivity. And don't get me wrong, there have been efforts by many governments, including this one, to connect those places. But I think we should start to think farther than just now. That is long term. So a country coming from war, road infrastructure would be one. Why? Because you need farm to market road, right? Liberia, as a growing economy, we should be able to feed ourselves. And that is one of the things we have even killed president for, according to Liberian history. In 1980, the late William Aratoba was killed because of the stable food rice. What have we done to address that? Road connectivity could be one of those things that will address that. How do we get there? Now we have yellow machine. Have we trained Liberians to be able to operate the machines to start building roads? In my opinion, no. Do we have education structure in place to build that capacity? We may, but are we funding them? Now, I follow the Ministry of Youth and Sport for some time now, and I know there are a few vocational centers, but one of which is the Monrovia Vocational Training Center, which is MVTC, which is located in Monrovia along the it used to be what King Sawabose Street. No, is that no Somalia Drive? It used to be the Somalia Drive. I think it's now called Japan Highway. Along the Somalia Drive. Now, from what I know, the last graduation, they graduated over 1,500 people. And I think at least 100 of those were heavy duty operators, heavy duty machine operators, which should be the yellow machine and other heavy equipments. Now, my question is, how well are these people trained to operate those machines? Are we actually equipping them, or are we just putting our numbers? Yeah? Are we just putting our number? What is our priority? Our developmental priority for Liberia after a civil war? In the last 20 years, what have we done to improve road network connectivity? What have we done to improve our healthcare system? What have we done different to improve our education system? To me, from what I have seen, going to Liberia back and forth and reading in newspapers and other things, I don't think we have done anything to improve those sectors. Today, healthcare is still behind. So what are we prioritizing? I can outline few. I think after the war, we should have started with our human capacity and then our infrastructure. Because if you build your human capacity can be then used to build your infrastructure. I remember they had Don Bosco, because I tried to register at Don Bosco at the time to attend there when I was waiting for my LU entrance result. And I went in there and tried, and I saw some guys that came out. In fact, Liberians who they were open out to meet ex-combatants. That's Don Bosco at the time the training were open to non-combatants. But I know some non-combatants took advantage of that, which was good. But my question is, what capacity did the government create for those people that came out of Don Bosco to be utilized in society so that other people can be encouraged to go to these places to learn? And there were our problem. I think there were some of the lapses are where Liberians get the training, but they don't have the employment ability or capacity or opportunity. Let me put it to use the better term. They do not have employment opportunities. And once that is lacking, people become discouraged because at the end they say, okay, if this guy is not getting a job after he graduated or he learned this trade, he's not getting employment, then why should I go there? So it is not just about training our people, it's also creating the opportunity of employment. And I think there where we should focus. We should prioritize our vocational institutions so that the guy is marketable in his community. For example, the MVDC, they train mechanics, they train now, I heard yellow machine operators, they train carpenters, they train masons, and so forth. So these are people that can be used within their community. Self-employment, self-reliance, and self-development, right? But the government should use entities that it has, like the public work, GSA, and other entities that can use these skills to develop those communities. We have schools in Monrovia that don't have chairs, sitting chairs for students, correct jog bowl for students. Those things are not there. And these are skills that I would think MVDC will be teaching the mechanics, the carpenters to display when they get out, upon graduation. But are we doing that? Liberia, we need to start prioritizing these things. It's 20 years. Our education system is still not developed to benefit Liberians. I was just watching one of these clips on social media, and I saw that a private institution, one of which the one that I attended, I graduated from, teachers were protesting. That was the first time I've seen that. I normally hear about government school teachers protesting and shutting down private schools. But this institution, teachers were protesting because they are not being paid. for months, and they even wait 4 months if that video clip in that interview is accurate. That is a shame that the private entity is not even paying its citizens. And why would they do it? I mean, its employees. Why would they do it when they have seen in history upon history that the government itself is not doing the same thing? Because people tend to learn from those in authority, right? That's what they do. So I would think our Liberian government and the citizen as well will start to prioritize those things that benefit our community so that we can start development. After war, infrastructure development is important, education is important. Now, let us look at our education. In my opinion, the government has not prioritized education. In that, teachers are not paid well. They do not get other incentives besides the $150 they gave them. They do not get subsidies. And at the end of the day, the cost of living in the country cannot be afforded by the teachers. So why would I want to be a teacher? The government have created a mentality or a thinking that being politician is more profitable than being a classroom teacher. So at the end of the day, teachers or people are not attracted to the field. I think what the government needs to do now, going forward, is create an attractive environment for teachers, where instead of giving incentive to some people that are already making a lot of money, divert those resources to the classroom. Because the youngsters, our young citizens, are the future of the country. When they are educated and empowered, we can then have every other thing that we want to put in place: infrastructure development, accountability, law or enforcement of laws. Because when these people are equipped with the educational tools to make sound decisions, they will elect the right people into office. And they themselves will be inclined enough to know that their community need the services that the government can provide. But if they are not inclined or educated to that, or not well informed to that, they will not be able to provide those necessities for their communities. And there were the problem. There's one of our lapses. Infrastructure development or education development. We don't have it. We have not put that in place. So I think we need to start focusing on the education system, develop it. And it is not only the 12 years education, our vocational education, and it should be strategized around the community in which we find them. For example, if we build a vocational school in Bon County, Lofa County, Nima County, those places are known for feeding Liberia. That's how it used to be called before the war, the breadbasket of Liberia. So we should tailor our education system or vocational system in Bon County to agriculture, carpentry, masonry, and things like that, because those people can easily be marketable in that community, right? Teach them commercial farming, fisher or animal farming, and those kind of things, so that they can start from where they are. Their skills are more useful to where they are, right? Their skills are more useful to where they are. Now, if we're to build similar thing in the southeast, where we mostly hear about timber, mining, and other stuff, the same thing will happen. We tailor that to mining, okay, or forestry development, not just extracting, but also reforestation. Because that's one of the things we're doing in Liberia. We're cutting down more trees than we are replanting. I remember back in the days, I think 1984, 85, between that time I was little, Doe has this thing that he said, when you cut, I think he said when you cut one tree, you should either plant 2 or 3 trees so that we can replenish. And that's when they started planting those trees that we see in Monrovia, in Broad Street, the center of Broad Street. He planted trees. I remember there was a drive for that, just to encourage Liberians to do reforestation instead of just deforestation. Okay, that is something we can apply. So you tailor our vocational school and most of our education system based on region, how it can benefit the region. I don't think it is fair to the Liberian people to tailor our education system to benefit just Monrovia. Because in my opinion, that's how it's tailored. And in fact, sometimes it is not even tailored to benefit Liberia. It's mostly in tailored to benefit the West. My secondary education was in Liberia. We learned physics, chemistry, geography, and all that stuff. And the learning of geography was not just limited to Liberia, but we learned all these world geography. What did I do with it? Nothing besides knowledge. But it's not useful to me. It's not useful to Liberia. We learned all the international history. What did that do for us? Nothing. It was not applicable to Liberia. It did not benefit my community. Besides me sounding or trying to sound smart, that I know this formula and all that stuff. So this is where Liberia needs to change the way of thinking. The way of our education system should be changed. Let's take, for example, if we use our traditional school we used to have before government was established in Liberia. The traditional schools taught people community-based education. That is, if you were in, let me use my hometown, Baila, as a reference point. The traditional school will teach you things that benefit people in Baila. Okay? Fishing, agriculture or farming, trap setting, and those kind of things. It benefited that community. Now, what I think the Liberian education system should do is modify that, commercialize those teaching so that it can benefit Baila, it benefit Swakoko, it benefit Grand Gideon, Nima, wherever the region is, based on what the people are doing, what is common to them, what is more beneficial to them. And then they will be contributing to society at large. Because if we modify it and commercialize their skills, then it becomes useful to the country. i.e., the reforestation and the deforestation in the southeast or the mining in the southeast. Teach them that, hey, if you cut down this tree, instead of sending the tree, the timber to Europe or other places, teach them you cut it down timber, hey, tree in carpentry, how they can manufacture those trees to build furniture. That furniture will be used not only in Grand Gideon or wherever, but that furniture can also be used to supply offices in Monrovia and government institutions and private institutions. The school system. So that timber, since you have trained that man in a vocational school to tailor it to benefit Grand Gideon or Maryland or Sano based on where you are, that manufacture of timber now have been turned into a finished product that can be used either in Liberia and eventually exported out of the country, finished product, which add value to Grand Gideon, to Maryland, or whatever it is in that region. Look at Sano and Maryland. They are on the seacoast. What is there? Fishery. Tailor a vocational school that will specialize just on fishery, because that's what the people do. They go to fishing. How they can start making canned fish, how they can do sawfish, how they can do different kind of fish, or how they can get different kind of products from fish. That adds value to Sano Kano, Maryland, since they're on the seacoast. Because it's then the sons of Maryland, the sons of Grand Gideon, or Sano County, that's their specialty. Liberia. It may seem hard, but it's not that hard. We are making it complex. Let us start thinking about ways that we can now manufacture things in our country using those basic things. But we got all these ministries, but not functioning in the way they're supposed to function, in my opinion. We are not adding values to what we have. If we empower our local people, they don't have to be dependent on government. Government will have less. They may not even worry about what government is doing. You could be stealing all the resources, they may not even care. The fact that they are empowered and they can do it for themselves without asking government for this and that, they wouldn't care. But again, because we are not empowering our nation, we are not empowering our people, it makes it difficult for our country to develop. That's just education. Look at healthcare. Healthcare, we need our people to be healthy. Over the last 20 years, Liberia is spending billions of dollars over the last 20 years to send their elites out of the country. Elites out of the country to do what? Medical tourism. Medical tourism. I did a research between 2018 2019. Medical tourism was hype, where almost everybody was leaving Liberia to go to Ghana, to Ivory Coast, and other places. And what in fact it is still doing. What I found out that every time a Liberian official left Liberia, or anytime anybody left Liberia to go to Ghana or any other place for medical treatment, you created unemployment for a driver, a taxi driver, a hotel receptionist, a hotel manager, a healthcare worker, the nurse, a doctor, a janitor in a hospital, the security in a hospital. I mean, that's how serious it is. But we don't even think about it that way. Every time one Liberian travel out of Liberia, that's what we're doing. They think about all of those people that leave Liberia to go to other countries to take currency from Liberia to that country. You employing, you adding to their job value. Why are you unemploying people in Liberia? That's how we need to look at it. Every time we do this, we are creating unemployment in our country. And we need to do better. We need to do better. You know, we are not helping our country by doing these things, Liberia. Our healthcare infrastructure have not been developed. JFK. What the government, in my opinion, should have done initially, especially after the war, is target institution by institution. St. Moravia is the most populated area. Start with JFK Redemption, because those are the two main hospitals in the Moravia vicinity. JFK Redemption. Either rebuild or build a new one. Because the capacity, I mean, the JFK being built, if I'm not mistaken, it was built in the 1960s. If I'm not mistaken. That's a long time ago. It's more than 50 years. That's a long, long time. The building have not changed. The population have increased. The demand is more. And the capacity have not grown. Now, somebody will say, but yeah, they got equipments, they're bringing equipment in JFK, they got doctors there. But is it really? Now look at the equipment. If the building is still strong and it's in tight and everything is constant, no leakage or whatever, no part of it closed. Before the war, JFK, Monrovia was not, in fact, Montserrat, we didn't have about 2 million people in Montserrat. In fact, I think before the war, and if I'm not mistaken, the whole population of Liberia was around 2.5 to 3 million people. The whole population of the entire country before the war. Today, we're talking pretty close to 5 million people, 5 point something million, almost to 6 million people in Liberia. Out of that, Montserrat have almost 2 million, if not 2 million people in Montserrat County. Most of those people, when they have critical condition, they are running to the first place, the government reference hospital, JFK, because Catholic Hospital is very expensive for them. EAW is very expensive for them. SDA Cobalt Clinic is very expensive for them. And many other mini private hospitals are mostly expensive for them. So the first place to try to reach is JFK. I know people come from as far as Nima County, Bon County, and other places to come to JFK. So that means the demand has tripled, if not quadrupled, for the capacity of JFK. Now, let us look at the structure. What do we have? One, JFK does not have access to emergency or vehicles. It does not. There is no place for a gurney, and we're in the 21st century. So when they were building that hospital back in the days, most hospitals, not only in Liberia, all over the world, access to disabled people was not really prevalent at the time. But we're in 2026. Those are things we should be thinking about. Gurney, because those days we're using stretcher to take people in the house in hospitals. Today we're using wheelchair or gurney that has tire. JFK don't have that kind of pathway for somebody to be driven in. Ambulance services is not there. So can JFK meet those things? No, it cannot. We don't have, in my opinion, from the last time I was there, about less than 2 years, almost 2 years ago, I would say now, they don't have a well working, established emergency department. They don't. But guess what's happening? That's one of the things that's happening in Liberia almost every day. Motor vehicle accident is happening right in front of that area, that JFK area. We're not talking about Broadville. We're not talking about other places. But from City Hall to Congo Town, there's a lot of accident happening over there. Almost, if not every day, all the time. All the time. So we need to see how we can work to develop that system. Okay, how we can develop that system. So we have to develop the healthcare sector as an entity. Now, what are some of the things we can do to develop the healthcare sector? What we can do is put some regulatory agency in place, right? Put some regulatory agencies in place. What are some of those things? In order for us to have a good functioning healthcare system, we must put regulatory agency that will regulate laboratory, pharmacy, radiology, and all the other stuff. Those things will help to regulate those entities. What do I mean? Let's look at a laboratory first. I think they have the Liberian Medical LMHRA, Liberia Medical Healthcare Research Authority, or something like that. That's a regulating authority, something like that. That's supposed to regulate every hospital entity or any health related entity in Liberia, institutions in Liberia, right? Which is good. It's a very good entity. But what I think we can do in that department is let the legislature empower that entity to create private regulatory agency that will be accountable to the LMHRA, regulating the various different departments in healthcare, right? Whether it's physical therapy, whether it's pharmacy, whatever. Those regulatory agencies. The reason I talk about privatizing them is because if you notice in the last 20 years, one privatization that have worked effectively in Liberia, and I think efficiently as well, is the telecommunication. Since private entity or private institution got involved in 2000, around, it started in the 90s, but in early 2000, it gave room for competition, and it reduced the liability for government to provide communication to its citizens. It have worked. If you privatize that, guess what? The private man needs his money. If government is really enforceful, when it comes to collecting their taxes, it's make it easier, right? Because then telecommunications don't have to pay tax to government because it's government owned. But if it is privatized, the private entity can pay tax to government. And that tax can be used by the regulatory agency to enforce every government regulation. Okay? Every government regulation. But if we're not doing that, it makes it challenging. So if we empower the private entity to report to LMHRA, who should be the government eye on the healthcare sector, it makes it easier for them. Then they don't have to read it. If they don't want to, they don't have to have a laboratory. But in my suggestion to the government, if LMHRA is going to be, they should continue to have their own laboratory just in case the private institutions are not doing its job, so that they can balance the equation. Okay? To make sure confirmation is going on that, hey, what this pharmacy is saying or what this regulatory agency is saying is true, is backed up by science, right? Not just corner hand or under the table deals. That's the reason you're doing that. So we need to establish these things in the healthcare, and that will strengthen your healthcare system. It is working in other places. Ghana do have it. Ghana have regulatory agency in Ghana that regulate laboratory science. But I follow the Ghanaian laboratory or system, and I follow a few of them in Africa. So it's working, and that is why, in fact, CAP, the one that I follow on in the United States, Clinical Laboratory, or College of American Pathology, they do have the international, and Ghana has one of the laboratories that the Liberian government and most other entities, Liberian citizens go to in Ghana, is regulated by CAP, College of American Pathology. Okay, so College of American Pathology will evaluate the laboratory to meet certain standard set by ISO, which is regulated, which is another international regulatory agency, right, or body. And I think Liberia falls on it, and that's what Liberia use, because I think Liberia, most of the healthcare system, they use the ISO numbers, right? They use the ISO number. So with that, if your Liberian hospitals or healthcare institutions have this regulatory agency that is governed by credit, that gives credibility, they say, hey, look, we got eyes on this guy, and they are meeting every standard that a laboratory is supposed to meet in order to qualify for certain benefit. If they are doing that, guess what? You don't have to leave Liberia to go to Ghana, to other places for treatment. No. That money can be diverted. It can be used in Liberia, because guess what? We will now start having people encouraged to become laboratory scientists in Liberia. We'll have people who, because they've seen the value added, right? You've seen the value added, because I know when people leave Liberia to go to Ghana, you're spending no less than, for a plane ticket, you're not spending no less than $200 or $300. About the last time I checked, it was $500 from Liberia to Ghana, a flight. Okay, when you leave from Liberia to go to Ghana, knowing Liberians, you're going to sleep in a hotel, especially if government officials are going. Most of them want to sleep in 5-star hotels, 4-star hotels. They're going to spend maybe $100, $200 a night. And if you got to spend 4 or 5 days, do the math. So your plane ticket to Liberia, maybe $500, and with inflation today, maybe about $500 to $600, $700. Then you go to Ghana, they see inflation. You got to pay for cab if you don't have a car there, or you got to pay for Uber or whatever Lyft you're using. You got to buy food. So you employ a restaurant operator and everybody that go in there. So you spend no less than 5, 6. We have not even considered the treatment yet. Okay, you spend regular treatment you're going for no less than $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Money that are going to the Liberian economy is going to a Ghanaian economy. The employment that's supposed to be in Liberia, that employment is going to Ghana. That is just common sense to me. So in Liberia or River State, just to answer your question, in Liberia they have a laboratory. I think they got the Liberia the Medical Dental Association, and they got another one called the Liberia laboratory something. I'm really not familiar, because I have not seen. I have checked for their website and information. I don't see anything, right? But what I know, the place that I visited is the LMHRA, the regulatory body. I visited that and I asked and I talked to some of their directors. I talked to even their overall boss at the time, and recommended what I'm telling you today, that what they should be asking for, that what they should serve as. Now, in Liberia, I don't know whether it's being even been regulated, because I will be frank with you. I visited I visited a few laboratories, including I'm not going to name names, but I visited a lot of laboratories in Liberia. And based on the criteria that I know for CAP, the criteria that my laboratory that I operate here meets, the only one facility that I visited that can meet up to 70% of that criteria. 70%, right? The reason I say 70% because they had somewhat 70% good SOP, standard operating procedure, in their lab. Their temperature logs were monitored. Uh, Most of their devices, uh, where I had the problem is with their calibration. Okay, because when I asked, they said they can take their machines from the lab to carry outside of the lab for calibration. And if you do take a machine from the lab and carry outside for calibration, once you take it out, in fact, from what I know from laboratory standard here, and I think it applies everywhere, it's not unique to America. Once you take your machine from the lab or you unplug it for a certain number of time, when you bring it back into use, you have to do calibration again. So when I met a few of them, those are the point I made to them. I said, look, once you take your machine, you unplug it, you take it to, let's say, you take it from Douala, let me put it that way, from Douala to Freeport for calibration. Once you took that machine from where it's sitting and you took it to another place to calibrate, once you bring it back, you're supposed to calibrate it again, because you drove it in the vehicle, it could have shook, something could have happened to it, so you had to calibrate it. So the fact that you're taking your machine out to go and calibrate it to bring it back, that is a red flag. You're not supposed to happen. So based on those things, I know almost, and I can almost say for a fact that if there is a laboratory regulatory agency in Liberia, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's the best way I can put it. Just from that point. In fact, almost besides that one laboratory, and when I and let me put it out there. I did not visit private laboratory institution in Liberia. Everywhere I have visited are all public, government owned. So maybe the private entities got different way. I have not had the opportunity to visit them, and my next, I'm trying to do the same, to visit the various ones that they talk about, the highly talk about. I want to see what they have, and maybe see how we can connect those bridges to help our healthcare system, especially for the public. I'm really interested in the health in the public, because from what I know, most of the private owned entities in Liberia are not owned by Liberians. And I'm not discouraging the foreigners from coming in, but I feel that most of the time, if it is like that, sometimes those people that are owning these institution may not be served by the very institution they own, and that is my concern. Okay, that way it concerns me. It concerns me that a man has a restaurant, or a man is inviting me to his home. He cook a nice, delicious food, but then he tells me he can't eat the food, but I should eat it. Then I see it as a big red flag. So the same thing should apply to healthcare. If you are a doctor in a hospital, you're working in a hospital, if you can't receive treatment in a hospital because you think it's not qualified, then you should not be providing that service to other people. That's how I see it. And it is a fact that most of the people that work in these major hospitals, that are the big people, not the small ones, the big people, where it's the Minister of Health, I can almost guarantee you the Minister of Health do not seek medical treatment at JFK. I can almost guarantee that. Okay? I would not even be surprised if the CEO of JFK don't receive medical treatment at JFK. I would not be surprised. So if that is the case, that's a problem. That is a problem. That is the referral hospital of Liberia. The president don't receive treatment there. The citizen, the elites don't receive treatment there. That's a problem. I'm not talking about the private man using his private money to go wherever he wants to go for treatment. No, I'm talking about people who are being paid by taxpayer money. Can I use the facility they are using taxpayer money to fund? That's where I have problem. So to answer your question, I really don't know who regulates, whether they have an entity besides the LMHRA in Liberia that regulate laboratory or institution in Liberia. I have not seen that yet. Maybe there is, but if there are, when I was there 2024, those institutions, if they are, in my opinion, they're not doing their job. Okay, they're not doing their job. Now, so and I like to spend more time on healthcare because that is what I know more about, right? And I spend more time again when it comes to healthcare in the laboratory because that is what I do for my daily living, right? And I think we can do better. And now, don't get me wrong, the doctors that are working in those places, they are making huge sacrifices. They are working hard. They are doing their best that they can because I can imagine what they are going through. They're working with what they have. So I give kudos to them. To be fair, I give kudos to them because some of these people work under the hardest condition, the most difficult condition. Sometimes they're working and electricity go off, the power go off, and they have to use their cell phone to do their job. That is an enormous pressure to be under. Enormous pressure to be able to have somebody's life in your hand, then you use a cell phone to treat that patient. You know? So yes, the healthcare workers are doing great work because they are working with what they have. But can those people that are backing up those institutions, financing the institution, can they do better? Yes. There are a lot of room for opportunity to grow. And I think we can do it. And most of the time people say, oh, no money, no money. Honestly, I don't think so. I think there is money. We're just not using the money in the right way. Because it doesn't make sense to me that 100 people or 103 people will be taking $65 million from a country budget just for their salary and benefit. When you got 5 point some more million people suffering, that doesn't add up to me. In Monrovia alone, or Monserrate alone, more than 1 million people, I can almost estimate more than 1 million people rely on JFK. More than 1 million people rely on JFK. JFK don't get $40 million a year for their budget. They don't. More than 1 million people depend, in my own calculation, more than 1 million people in Monrovia area or Monserrate area, in Monserrate, rely on JFK for treatment, for care, and everything. But JFK budget does not reach $46 million. But you got one little group of people getting $46 million, $65 million of the Liberian budget. Tell me, my people, what the logic in that? And it's not just alone. Look at your Liberian national budget every year. Liberian, that's your duty. The finance ministry does good job on that. And I've been following this since, I think, 2009, 2010. I've been following the Liberian budget. The finance every year. And every year, what I do, I don't look at the projected budget to determine what is going on. No. So right now, the budget that I look at now is the budget from the previous year, because that is what the government have already realized, right? They have already realized that budget. They have already made use of that budget. So the current budget, the 1.2 billion, next year, the next fiscal year is what I'm going to start looking at, the 1.2 billion. That's how I review my budget. I don't look at the current budget. I look at the previous budget to know what the government did with that money. For me, that's how I review the Liberian budget. I know people get hyped up when they see the budget come up, and that's why it becomes a talking point on the major platforms. They want to discuss the current budget. No, to me, that is not what I do. I look at the previous budget because that have already been used. Okay, when you look at that, then you know what was used, what the government projected, what they realized, and what they used. That is how I look at the budget. So that's what Liberians need to do. And the Ministry of Finance, to be frank, I can give them credit for that. Those information are almost always available on the Ministry of Finance website. And it is your responsibility, Liberians, to go in there and you will see those documents. Review it for yourself. Take your time. Instead of just on the cell phone and scrolling and getting hyped up on these social media posts. When somebody posts small thing about somebody, oh, you jump up. About your lawmaker, oh, you jump up. Go and see the money that your lawmaker is making every year. And you, the district that he represents, all of you can't even see 25% of that development in your community. You can't see it. That is what we need to do as Liberians. Again, that's why I talk about education first. Because once you are educated and well-informed, you will know what to do. You will know how to analyze things. Other than that, it will be difficult for you. It will be very difficult for you. So, Liberia, that's what we need to do. That is what we need to. We need to start looking at look at those every year. So this year, go back and look at the 2024-2025 budget. Go and look at that and see what the government realized. See how much your lawmakers receive. See how much the Ministry of State for Presidential receive. See how much the Finance Ministry receive. See how much Education Ministry receive. See how much JFK receive. And once you start doing that, then you will understand where your country is and how you think those resources should be used. Then you start making informed decisions. Anything outside of that, you're just following political rhetorics. That's what you're doing. And you don't have to be a sedition to evaluate your budget. No, you don't have to be or to oppose or agree with the budget. You don't have to be a unity party man to agree or oppose the budget. Do it for Liberia. Do it for Liberia. I always stress this point. Every president will go. Every ruling political party will go. But one common denominator, Liberia will always remain. So instead of fighting to develop your political party because they're leading or defending them, try to change that around and start defending the Constitution and Liberia as a country. Now, our discussion today is our developmental priorities. I talk about education, number one. I talk about infrastructure. I only kind of push healthcare ahead because I thought it was very significant. A country after war, one of the problems or one of the things you will develop is your security. Security should have been number one, especially where we heard, if I'm not mistaken, I'll be wrong on this one, but I think 1989, I think they said a group of 11 men, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. 1989, I think they said they called and said the special forces of the NPFL at the time. I think there were 11 men. 11 men started a war that conquered the entire Liberia. It didn't call it just a segment. No. It covered the entire landscape of Liberia in less than 8 months. In less than 8 months, a whole country was covered by a war that was started by 11 men. And I could be wrong on that number, but I think I could be wrong. But it was not equal up to 20. Even if it was 20, it's still a small number to infiltrate to start a revolution and engulf a whole country. It's still a small number. Yeah, sure. I know, yes, health education is not ready or it haven't discussed much. And I brought this topic also that in the next few weeks, we can start tackling one by one some of these things. And again, thank you for saying that. I like that thought, because obesity, people, when you get big in Liberia, the people say the men are rich men, but they're killing themselves. And I don't know, I'm a veteran of that criticism, but I know I'm not. Every time I go to Liberia, I got one or two people who ask me where I came from America. They say, "Oh, your friend they're looking healthy." I say, "Well, I don't know what you define healthy to be, but because I'm not fat, my gut not growing, they say I'm not healthy. I'm not from America." So that's another thing that we need to educate ourselves on, right? Because those overweight people who suffer from obesity, when they die from stroke or heart attack, then the people say, "Oh, that witchcraft, but it is really not witchcraft, right? But those are topics that we'll be discussing gradually as time goes by. Yeah, but thank you for bringing that point out, right? But yeah, so our security in a country where we're talking about 6 million people today, our security, I don't know how much, I don't know the strength of the military, and I'm not here to pronounce the strength of the military. But as far as I'm concerned, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, I saw a social media video of a guy at the Guinean Liberian border still showing that the Guinean military are still on Liberian soil. The Guinean military are still on Liberian soil. If what he's saying, you're showing the town or that bordering town, Solomon, or they call it, that the place he said, according to him, I guess he lived in that area, that on a given day, that place is a busy area and the population should be around 3,000. That's his estimate. If it is true, it should be around 3,000. But when he was showing that video, I could bet I didn't even see anybody. I think almost a 15 to 20-minute video long. I could see almost nobody in the street. A town of 3,000 people. He said his estimate is about 50 people. Why? Because we didn't build. After the war, we didn't build our military. We did not. In one of our segments, I mentioned this. I said, look, why it is true, we rely on the West sometimes for some of these things, but sometimes we are turning to the wrong place. We are turning to the wrong place for help when it comes to addressing our security needs. Sometimes we are. Most of the wars, and I'm not saying what America did could not be used in our country. No, I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not discrediting whatever effort they apply. But I think the best way that we have been good to train the Liberian military, we have been the guys from the West African region, the Nigeria, the Ghana, and so forth. Okay? But for whatever reason, and in fact, we all know the reason, because of the colonial brainwashing thing that we have, where we feel that everything good comes from outside of the African continent. That is why we always try to bow down to these people to make them feel that they got to be the one to show us how to lead our people. They got to be the one to show us how to run our affairs. They got to be the one to show us. And that's the mistake we keep making. Our terrain, the Liberian terrain, is mostly jungle. And let me tell us this. And it's not hidden, okay? It's in the public. Most of the time, when America is about to get involved in war in any country, the more focus have been in the last 40 years, if I'm not mistaken. In the last 40 years, not a mistake, by the way. Most of the war America have been involved in is in the desert region. In the last 40 years, from the 1980s, they have been in that. In fact, in the 1970s, actually, they started. They have been in that desert region in the late 1970s. Okay, in the Asia, Mediterranean Asia aspect, what they call the Middle East, quote unquote Middle East, right? Because I don't know what the left and the right is, or then somebody began in the middle. But anyway, that region is where they have been focused. So guess what? All their training, most of their training, 90, if I'm not mistaken, at least 90% of their military training is focused focused on how they can navigate those regions when it comes to military force capacity. But then we rely on them 2006, I think it was between 2006 and 2007, to go and train people who warfare is in a jungle or tropical region. It don't add up. Again, that resources were being used better. I think that resources were being given to ECOWAS region to train the Liberian army, and they would have done a great job. I believe so. And just to let us know, Africans, let us know, it's not by chance. It's not by chance. It was intentional, in my opinion, that when they saw that ECOMO was about to bring lasting peace to Liberia, when they saw that, ECOMIL, I used to be called, ECOMIL was about to bring lasting peace to Liberia. They quickly changed the name to UNMIL so that they can get the credit to tell us that, oh, we cannot solve our own problem. They had to solve our problem. I still believe that it was the wrong move for the African continent to do, to allow themselves to fight a war, fight to maintain peace in the country from 1990 all the way to 2001, 2002, to change the name from ECOMIL to UNMIL so that the United Nations can get credit. I think that was the wrong move. I think that was the wrong move. That was not the right move. It was again to prove the Western superiority over us, but we did not pay attention to that. But I personally gave the credit to ECOMO, to ECOWAS, not UNMIL. UNMIL did not bring peace to Liberia. That is not true. You can say whatever you want to say. You can listen to whatever the Western media want to tell you. I was in Liberia. I'm not speaking from third hand or second hand. I was there. I live it. I experience it. They only started bringing them in, the Pakistanis and the other people in, later when they knew that the war was almost over, that Liberia, the African had already done the job. They only came out to get the credit. That's what I believe, and I will continue to believe that. Nobody's going to change my opinion on that. That was a discredit to our West African brothers, especially Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and others. That was a discredit to them, in my opinion. They did the hard work. They died in those jungles. They did. Not UNMIL. UNMIL did nothing but prolong our war. United Nations just prolonged our war for profit, in my opinion. I don't regret it. I don't regret saying that. But Africa needs to wake up and know that you can solve your own problem. Empower your people. Let us empower our people, and then we'll make it. Again, Liberians, and I'm sorry, Brother River says Pro. I know you wanted to come on, but for some reason, and I'm going to check the setting this week, work on the platform. Our IT man is out of town, so I'm just filling in, and I'll try to see how I can create a way so that I can add you as a guest. I will send you the link, but I did not see you come across. That's why I couldn't make it. But I will try to get in touch with our IT guy so that maybe, hopefully, next week or so, you can join us. Or anytime in the future, whenever you're available, you can join us. But thank you for your contribution in the back. It was great to have you on. And please, you guys, those are out there that are listening, please share our videos. And if Liberia shall rise, we all have to work and we all have to contribute. Again, our discussion today was the developmental priority for Liberia. What is your take? My take was we should, one, improve our education system, and we should localize our education mentality or strategy. That is, it should be by the needs of the community. Look at Grandjida. If timber mining is the priority, train the locals and let them commercialize that sector. If it is Sano or Maryland, say most of them is fishing, let them commercialize that. Train the people in that way so that we can give value. If it is Bon Nima or and Lofa, say they used to be called the breadbasket of Liberia, agriculture, animal farming, whatever they can do, train them so that they can commercialize and add value to it. And all the other places, whatever they have in that region, let it be specific. Like right now, we're looking at Cape Mount. It's becoming a tourist attraction for surfing and other stuff. Industrialize that tourism, use tourism as one to attract people in that area. It's a historical landmark. Train the citizens how to sell that, how to sell tourism. You are empowering and selling and valuing. Let them use the ecosystem as a means of survival. But you empower your citizen. And then if most rather is where you're going to sell politics, sell your politics. Let them fight over their politics. But empower the other regions so that they can utilize the resources they have. Let it be commercialized so that they can be empowered to develop those communities. They don't have to rely on government to go and build roads. They won't have to rely on government to go and build hospitals. They won't have to rely on government to even improve their education sector. No, because you have already empowered the citizens, and they themselves will start taking the bull by the horn and carry on. That was number one, education. Number two, I talk about infrastructure. And I emphasize the healthcare sector because I think when the citizens are healthy, they can do better. But that is not the only infrastructure area that needs to be developed. And I said the government is doing well on road, but the maintenance of the road, we talk about yellow machine. Are the people trained? Are the people trained? The Liberians, the yellow machine, we heard about it for a year and a half before it came into the country. What was the government doing to prepare operator for that machine? Those are things we should have been doing. Prepare. Put money in the budget. Today we hear about, I think Bernie Summer got over $2 million or so he won for a yellow machine. Isn't that something that should have been captured in the budget from last year? You know? But that's what we should be thinking about. And then last but not least, one of the critical area is our military. We should have trained, we should have used ECOMOG, some of them who have been in the bush, in the jungles, fighting with AFL at the time, and whoever or forces were fighting with, to know the terrain, and they have seen the terrain. Use them as the one to train our Liberian military. And we should have increased the capacity of the military, especially after the Civil War. We should have controlled our borders, man our borders 24/7, because that's where the truth came from. It was not like the 1985 coup which started in Monrovia. No. The 1989 started from the border and it captured the entire, it engulfed the entire country. So we should have increased our military capacity. But we're going 20 years. There is nothing we can show for the peace that we have. Whereas other countries that have survived war, we see what they have done. Rwanda is a typical example, what they have done. Angola, another one that when we were growing up, we heard about them. And many other countries. Look, our country is unique, it's beautiful, it has everything that we need. We need to stop wasting our energy and thinking that the man or the person who is suppressing us or oppressing us or choking us is going to be our savior. That is not true. And I know our leaders know this, but they just ignore it because most of them are intended to just fill their pocket and they don't think about the next generation. We need to be intentional about fighting corruption in our country. We need to be intentional about building our infrastructure. We need to be intentional about building our education sector. We need to be everything that we do in Liberia, we need to be intentional about it. If not, we're just pushing the can down the road for the next generation to pick up. And that is just wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you guys for joining us today. River says Pro, I want to say thank you. My brother Harrison Dawa, I want to say thank you for joining. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Liberia shall rise. Our hope and our belief is Liberia will rise. And if Liberia shall rise, all of us, Liberians in the country, government officials, non-government officials, diaspora citizens or non-diaspora citizens, loving Liberians all over around, all everywhere, please. It is our duty to put our effort so that Liberia can rise. With that, I want to say thank you for joining me. You should have been doing something different with your life, but you took that time to listen to me. Please share and please let us continue to push Liberia, because Liberia is the only country, as some politicians can say, is the only country that they cannot deport us from. So with that, I say, have a blessed and wonderful week.